On the night the sea turned upside down, Jack Sparrow was not supposed to be sober. The Caribbean sky was clear at first. Stars scattered like coins over black velvet water. The Black Pearl sliced through the waves, her sails fat with a warm wind. Lantern lights swung gently, painting gold on wet wood. The crew snored, cursed, and dreamed of rum below deck. Only Jack stood alone at the bow, one hand on the rail, the other wrapped around his compass. The compass needle was doing that irritating thing again, spinning like it owed him money. Jack squinted at it. "You're supposed to point to what I want most, mate. I distinctly recall asking for treasure, not dizziness." The needle wobbled, shook once, and then locked, dead ahead, into empty ocean and starlight. At the same moment, a cold wind sliced across the deck. Jack's hair whipped around his face. The warmth vanished as if someone had opened a door into winter. Clouds boiled into existence where there had been none. Purple lightning spidered across the sky without sound. The sea, moments ago a friendly black mirror, now heaved and churned. Behind him, Gibbs stumbled out of the companionway, half asleep and clutching a bottle. "Captain." Storm came out of nowhere. Jack didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the horizon where the compass was pointing. The stars there were wrong. They twisted, stretching like molten metal, spiraling into a whirlpool of light. The ocean beneath them rose, not in waves but in a single impossible wall, curving upward into the sky. Gibbs blinked blearily. "That's not natural." "On the contrary," Jack murmured. "It's exactly my sort of natural." The Pearl shuddered. A low hum vibrated up through the hull, through Jack's boots, into his bones. The whirlpool of stars grew larger, swallowing the sky, until there was nothing but a roaring spiral of darkness rimmed in sickly green and violet glow. The sea didn't crash against the ship. It climbed. Water rose like a living thing, curling around the hull, lifting the Pearl as gently as a toy. Crew spilled onto the deck, shouting, crossing themselves, clutching ropes. Someone screamed that the world was ending. Perhaps it was. The compass burned in Jack's palm. "Into the whirlpool, then," he whispered. Again. The world snapped. There was no water, no sky, no wind, no sound. Jack floated in a black so thick it felt like cold tar, the Pearl hanging beside him as if ship and man were carved into the void. Strange shapes moved in the distance, enormous shadows gliding past like mountains adrift. Whispers slid along his nerves. Words in no language he knew. Lost one. Wrong sea. Another piece for the game. Then the darkness split. A million pinpricks of light ignited. Not stars. Harder. Sharper. Some burned red, others cold white. Massive structures slid out of the void. Metal skeletons the size of continents, wheels of iron and light, spears of steel stabbing through the black. And ahead, looming like a cathedral forged by a mad god, was a colossal ship. Its hull was a city of guns and towers, statues and Gothic arches, spiked spires and glowing stained glass windows. Engines the size of temples burned at its rear, vomiting blue fire into the void. Vast golden aquillas spread their double-headed wings along its flanks. The Black Pearl drifted toward it like a rowboat. Jack's mouth went dry. That is not the Navy. A cone of blinding light speared the Pearl. Invisible hands seized the ship, dragging her forward. Cannons swung uselessly. Ropes creaked. Men screamed. Jack's compass finally died, its needle spinning once and stopping, pointing nowhere at all. The Pearl was drawn into a yawning hangar bay, an open mouth of steel filled with rows of cannons, cranes, and lines of armored soldiers as small as ants against the scale of their warship. Force fields shimmered at the edges, holding air where there should have been none. The moment the Pearl crossed the threshold, gravity slammed back. The ship crashed onto a metal platform with a thunderous clang. Crew tumbled like dice. A voice boomed across the hangar from unseen speakers. Unidentified vessel. You are boarding the Imperial Navy cruiser Gloria Invictus. By order of the Holy Inquisition, you will power down all weaponry, submit to inspection, and pray that the Emperor judges you worthy. Jack dusted himself off, wincing. Emperor. Right. Can't be worse than the East India Trading Company. Armored figures advanced down the docking bridge, towering men in heavy carapace armor, their boots ringing on the metal. They wore helmets with glowing lenses and carried rifles that hummed with restrained violence. One of them raised a device, listened to a crackling voice, then pointed at Jack. That one. The rest to holding cells. Jack spread his hands. I'm flattered, truly, but I prefer to be courted before being imprisoned by mysterious armored men. They gave him the kind of look only men who had never heard of humor can give. Shackles snapped around his wrists with efficient brutality. Minutes later he was marched through corridors that made no architectural sense. Endless steel, skull motifs everywhere, candles in niches, purity seals fluttering like prayer flags. It was as if a cathedral and a cannon factory had produced a particularly angry child. He was thrown into a chamber that felt more like a shrine than an interrogation room. Candles burned on iron sconces. A two-headed eagle watched from the wall. Incense warred with the metallic tang of oil and ash. At the far end, a figure in dark robes stood with back turned, examining a floating hollow display of the pearl. Servoskulls, literal skulls with mechanical limbs and blinking lenses, circled him like lazy vultures. The figure spoke without turning. You brought an entire wooden vessel into vacuum. Your crew has no recognized gene markers. Your clothing is archaic. Your ship's technology is non-existent. This is not a Xeno's craft, nor Mechanicus pattern. You're either a cultist, a demon, or something worse. Which is it? Jack tilted his head. I'm going to take a bold stab and say, none of the above? The figure finally turned. His face was pale and thin, lined by years of suspicion. A metal implant crossed one eye, ticking and whirring softly. He wore a chestplate embossed with the imperial Aquila and a rosette that glowed faintly with power. I am Inquisitor Merenthal, he said. I have executed worlds for less blasphemy than whatever you are. Jack considered this, then smiled. Jack Sparrow. Captain. Conditionally. The Inquisitor's eye implant hissed. There is no record of your existence. Story of my life. Merenthal stepped closer, studying him as one might inspect a bomb. From which planet do you hail, Captain? Not sure it has one. We mostly call it the world. Lots of water. Rum. Irritating bureaucrats. Jack shrugged. Caribbean if we're being specific. The servoskulls beeped as their Auspex scanners whirred. One buzzed around Jack's head. Oi, Jack said, swatting half-heartedly. Personal space. Merenthal ignored the exchange. No such system exists in Imperial charts. And you passed through open void without a Geller field or warp drives. You should have been torn apart, body and soul. Jack's smile thinned. I've been told I'm difficult to get rid of. The Inquisitor watched him for a long silent moment, weighing options the way other men weighed coins. Then the room trembled. Sirens screamed through the ship. Red sigils flared on the hollow display. A Vox-amplified voice crackled from the ceiling. Multiple warp signatures emerging off the port bow. Markings corrupted. Likely Chaos Raiders. Shields up. All hands to battle stations. Merenthal's expression hardened. Of course. The warp never brings one problem at a time. He looked at Jack, at the hollow of the pearl, at the frantic data streaming in. You, anomaly, remain useful until proven otherwise, he said. You will stay where I can see you. Jack gestured to his manacles. Not planning on going anywhere. Terribly invested in surviving the day. They marched him to the ship's strategium, a cavernous bridge filled with officers at control stations, glowing tactical displays, and an enormous viewport showing the abyss outside. There, he saw them for the first time. Chaos ships. They prowled from the swirling purple storm like sharks from bloody water. Twisted parodies of Imperial cruisers, hulls warped into leering faces, spires grown like bone, hulls bleeding red light. Warp fire licked at their prows. Jack let out a low whistle. Those are some ugly boats. Merenthal didn't blink. Trader vessels of the Ardent Serpent warband. They feast on isolated ships. Today they find the wrong prey. The Gloria Invictus's guns spat light. Massive lances roared, cutting through the void in blinding beams. Macro cannons thundered. The Chaos ships returned fire, the silent roar of their weaponry painting space with deadly flowers. The whole cruiser shook. Lights flickered. Klaxons wailed. Jack stumbled, slammed into a console, and glanced at the tactical display. Symbols moved across it like pieces on a board. The Invictus was bigger, slower, surrounded. He'd seen this pattern before, just with smaller cannons and more water. A ship circling. Another cutting off escape. A third waiting for the kill. He watched the glowing lines of their trajectories and, for the first time since arriving in this nightmare, felt something familiar, a problem with a solution. "Marenthal," he said. The Inquisitor ignored him, barking orders. "Marenthal," Jack repeated louder. A nearby officer snarled, "Silence, prisoner." Another impact hurled them all sideways. Jack grinned crookedly. "If you don't want to die, you might consider taking advice from someone whose profession is not dying." The Inquisitor's mechanical eye pivoted toward him. "Speak." Jack jabbed a finger at the display. "Those three there. They're hurting you. You turn to broadside one, the other gets your weak angle. Seen it before. Best way to kill a merchant ship in my world. Only difference is their guns are uglier and your ship is larger than my ego, which is saying something." An officer scoffed. What could a feral world pirate know of void maneuvers? "Enough to know you're thinking like a fortress, not a thief," Jack said. "If you want to get out of a trap, you don't batter straight. You make them think you're running, then hit where they're certain you won't." He tapped a section of empty void behind the closest Chaos cruiser. "Feint a retreat. Kill speed, drop as if engines fail, let them close in fast. Too fast. Then you kick whatever monstrous engines you've got up to full, cut across their trajectory, and blast their exposed underbelly. Do you have an underbelly here?" He added. "Feels important." Officers muttered. It was mad. Reckless. Unorthodox. The Inquisitor stared at the display, running the scenario in his mind, then turned to his helmsman. "Can our drives manage such a burn?" "Risky," the helmsman said. "But possible." Marenthal looked back at Jack. "If this fails, I will personally feed you to the warp." Jack smiled. Motivation. "I like it." The order went out. Engines powered down. The great cruiser slowed, her guns falling silent. The Chaos ships pounced, hungry for the kill, closing in with predatory eagerness. Alarms screamed as they angled for firing solutions, moving into tight formation to tear the Imperial ship apart. "Now," Marenthal said quietly. Engines roared. The Gloria Invictus lunged sideways like a beast coming back from the dead. Artificial gravity screamed. Men were flung to the deck. The ship cut directly across the lead Chaos cruiser's path. For a moment, in the viewports, Jack saw the enemy ship up close, its hull a nightmare of rust and screaming faces, chains dragging frozen bodies in the vacuum, windows glowing hellish red. Then the Invictus broadside fired at point-blank range. Lance batteries tore through the Chaos vessel like a hot knife through rotten fruit. Explosions rippled along its length. Its spine snapped. It broke apart in a silent, beautiful firestorm. The other Chaos ships faltered. Their formation shattered. "Press the attack," Marenthal ordered. "Pursue and purge." As the cruiser turned to continue the fight, he glanced at Jack. "You are still a heresy waiting to be classified. But, for the moment, you are a useful one." Jack rocked on his heels. "I do try." The battle raged on. Eventually the Chaos ships fled, slipping back into the warp like wolves into a storm. The Invictus limped, hull scarred, fires smoldering but alive. Repairs began. Prayers were chanted. The crew returned to their routines, which mostly involved cleaning, rearming, and pretending they were not constantly one bad day away from annihilation. Jack, still technically a prisoner, found himself watched.